There is a moment that reveals more about a man than years of comfort ever could. It arrives without ceremony, a sudden pressure, an unexpected resistance, a silence filled with uncertainty. And in that moment, before any visible action is taken, the mind makes its first movement. It either steadies itself or it flinches. Most people believe weakness begins when they quit, but long before the body retreats, the mind has already moved away. It recoils from discomfort, it searches for escape. It creates distance between itself and the pressure standing before it. This movement is often invisible, so subtle it passes unnoticed, yet it is here that strength is either preserved or lost. Long before the modern world turned resilience into endless discussion, the warriors of Japan understood this truth with severe clarity. Miyamoto Musashi wrote not merely of defeating opponents, but of cultivating a mind that remained unmoved. In the discipline of Bushido, hesitation was not simply delay, it was fracture. The moment the mind flinched, action lost its unity. The samurai trained not to eliminate fear, but to eliminate recoil. They understood that discomfort would always arise, pressure would always appear. Uncertainty would always stand at the threshold of action. The question was never whether these things would come, the question was whether the mind would remain whole when they did. Chapter 1. The First Reaction. In the modern world lived a man named Ren. He was thoughtful, capable, and disciplined by most visible measures. He worked diligently, kept his commitments more often than not, and appeared composed under ordinary conditions. To those around him, he seemed reliable, but there was something Ren had begun to notice in himself, though he could not yet name it. Whenever pressure appeared, something subtle happened inside him. It was not panic. It was not collapse. It was smaller than that. A task would become difficult and his attention would drift. A conversation would grow uncomfortable and his thoughts would search for distraction. A decision would demand courage and his mind would begin quietly calculating ways to postpone it. These reactions were so quick they often passed without examination. To Ren, they felt natural, intelligent even. Why confront discomfort directly when there might be a better moment later? Why step into resistance immediately when delay offered temporary ease? And so, without realizing it, he obeyed these impulses. Not dramatically, quietly, repeatedly. Over time, this became his unseen pattern. He did not yet understand that the problem was not his actions themselves, it was the movement that preceded them. His mind was flinching long before his body ever retreated. Chapter 2. The Samurai's Measure. The samurai measured a man differently. They did not judge him by his intentions, nor by his outward appearance of composure. They judged him by what happened internally at the first contact with resistance. When pressure appeared, did the mind contract? Did it search for escape? Did it recoil, however slightly, from what stood before it? Bushido demanded something severe. The mind was expected to remain exactly where it was. No internal retreat, no subtle recoil, no movement away from the moment. This was not because the samurai were immune to discomfort. They felt uncertainty as deeply as any man. They knew fear, exhaustion, and doubt. But they trained themselves not to follow the first impulse these states created. Musashi described a state of directness, where the mind does not scatter or divide. It neither rushes ahead nor retreats backward. It simply remains. This was the foundation of clean action. To the samurai, the first movement of the mind determined everything that followed. If it flinched, hesitation entered. If hesitation entered, division followed. And divided action is always weaker than unified action. Chapter 3. The Invisible Habit. Ren's understanding began to shift one evening during a simple task. He had committed himself to finishing a piece of difficult work before resting. It was not overwhelming, merely tedious and demanding sustained attention. After 20 minutes, discomfort arose. It was subtle at first: restlessness, a tightening in his chest, a sudden urge to check his phone. A thought suggesting he could finish tomorrow with a clearer mind. Normally, he would have obeyed without question, but this time he paused. For the first time, he observed what was happening inside him before acting. He noticed the instant discomfort appeared, his mind had already begun moving away. It had started searching for exits before the task itself had become truly difficult. This realization unsettled him. He saw that much of his inconsistency had not come from inability or lack of discipline. It came from this automatic internal recoil. His mind had been trained to flinch. And because the movement was so immediate, it had shaped his actions before conscious thought ever entered. Chapter 4. The Discipline of Remaining. The samurai addressed this through disciplined stillness. Their training often involved prolonged discomfort, holding difficult postures, repeating precise movements, sitting in silence beyond the point of restlessness. To the untrained eye, these practices seemed simple, but their purpose was exact. They forced the practitioner to encounter the first impulse to recoil and remain unmoved. Ren began experimenting with this principle. He chose small moments each day to practice remaining exactly where discomfort appeared. If restlessness arose during work, he stayed. If silence became uneasy, he remained in it. If uncertainty appeared before action, he resisted the instinct to retreat. At first, this felt unnatural. His mind protested immediately. It offered reasons to move, to adjust, to delay. The discomfort intensified when ignored. But Ren remembered what the samurai understood. The discomfort itself was not the enemy. The flinch was. And so he stayed. Chapter 5. The Space Before Action. Over time, Ren began noticing something remarkable. Between discomfort and reaction, a space was appearing. Previously, the moment pressure emerged, action followed automatically. The mind recoiled and behavior adjusted without awareness. Now there was a pause, a brief opening in which he could witness the impulse without obeying it. Within this space, something essential became possible: choice. This was not the endless modern idea of choice, where countless options create confusion. This was a narrower, sharper kind of freedom, the ability to remain. The samurai trained relentlessly for this moment, not because they sought endless self-control, but because they understood that freedom begins where automatic reaction ends. A warrior who reacts unconsciously is ruled by impulse. A warrior who remains present decides deliberately. This distinction changed Ren's understanding completely. Strength was not forcing himself through difficulty. Strength was refusing the unconscious recoil that made difficulty appear larger than it was. Chapter 6. Pressure without retreat. As Ren's practice deepened, life began testing it. A difficult conversation arose at work, one he would normally postpone. He felt the familiar tightening, the mind's instinctive retreat, the immediate search for delay. But now he recognized it. Instead of following it, he remained. He spoke directly. The discomfort was intense, but it passed. What remained afterward was not relief, it was solidity. Later, similar moments appeared. Challenging decisions, unexpected criticism, uncertainty without clear resolution. Each time, the same internal movement surfaced, and each time, Ren practiced staying. Gradually, the flinch weakened. Not because life became easier, but because his mind no longer recoiled automatically from pressure. The samurai cultivated exactly this. A mind that remains under pressure becomes precise. It wastes no energy escaping. It gathers itself completely into action. Chapter 7. Identity forged in stillness. Something deeper soon began to change. Ren no longer viewed these practices as techniques. They were becoming part of who he was. He stopped asking whether he felt ready to face discomfort. He stopped negotiating with resistance each time it appeared. The answer had already been decided. He would remain. This shift transformed his identity. Before, he had seen himself as someone who managed difficulty when necessary. Now he began to see himself as someone who does not move away from it. The samurai understood this deeply. Discipline was never meant to depend on mood. It was meant to become nature. A warrior does not deliberate over whether to steady himself under pressure. He steadies because steadiness is what he has become. Ren was beginning to understand this. The mind that does not flinch is not created through isolated acts of courage. It is built through repeated refusal to recoil. Chapter 8. The quiet strength. Months passed. Externally, little had changed. Ren's life looked much the same. But internally, everything was different. His thoughts had grown quieter. His actions more direct. His attention less fragmented. When discomfort appeared, it no longer controlled the direction of his movement. He noticed a new quality within himself. Stillness. Not passivity, not detachment. A grounded presence that remained even when pressure rose. This was the strength the samurai cultivated. It was not loud or dramatic. It did not seek recognition. It simply endured. A mind that does not flinch does not need constant reassurance. It does not collapse into uncertainty. It remains where it is, and from that stillness, action becomes clean. The mind that does not flinch is not born through comfort. It is forged in the small moments most people avoid. The instant discomfort appears. The breath before uncertainty. The silent pressure that asks whether you will remain or retreat. Most people believe strength is proven through visible endurance, but the samurai understood something quieter and more severe. Strength is decided before action is ever seen. It is decided in the first movement of the mind. When you stop obeying the impulse to recoil, something changes. The gap between pressure and action closes. The mind stops scattering. Presence deepens. And in that presence, a different kind of strength begins to emerge. Not force, not intensity, but steadiness. A quiet, disciplined stillness that remains exactly where it is. And once that stillness is cultivated, the world may press against it, but it will not make it flinch.